Hello, welcome to People's 20 Most Memorable Moments of the Decade. I'm Andrea Bell.
And I'm Jeremy Parsons. So much happened over the past 10 years. It's almost hard to keep track of all the 2010s brought us.
That's why the editors of People magazine distilled the decade to its 20 most memorable moments leading up to 2020.
So we got to sit down with some of them and we talked about what made these moments so memorable and why they made our list.
So without any further ado, here's our list of the 20 most memorable moments of the decade.
First on our list, the wedding of William and Kate on April 29, 2011. I spoke with People editor-in-chief Dan Wakeford about why this royal wedding was such a pivotal moment. The royal wedding of Kate and Prince William, this huge event, and you've got this unique perspective from sort of both sides of the pond, right? But talk about how significant it was and the regalia of it, the celebrity factor, and all those different elements that played into this magical day.
I mean, we know William from growing up. We really mother him in a way that even from America we have a big affection for this boy who lost his mother, Harry and William, and then you're seeing him get his fairy tale ending for meeting his bride.
Talk about this though, as the public seemed to really embrace them and get behind Prince William and Kate's marriage and their relationship. How did celebrations sort of take off around the world? It was a global event. When this wedding happened.
It really was a global event. I think it was 23 million people in America watched.
Alone, right.
2 billion people in the world watched this.
Talk about the appeal and why they are in this unique position to have celebrities show up, these huge stars that want to be a part of such an event.
I mean, William and Harry grew up with meeting all of these celebrities, some of them through their mother, Princess Diana, who's friends with Elton John and other dignitaries, other celebrities. But then Harry and William have done a lot of charity work over the years. They've met a lot of celebrities. They've become friends with celebrities, so they got to invite those people to the wedding. Then also you had the dignitaries around the world who have to be invited to this because it is the heir to the throne getting married. So there are invitations that the Queen has to give out here.
As someone who grew up with the royals as part of your direct life and being from the UK, how did this wedding compare to other events and other royal moments?
It wasn't so stuffy. There was a real playfulness about it. You had the whole idea that Kate was the first commoner. She was the first commoner, it's a ridiculous term, but she was the first person who was not from the aristocracy to marry into the royal family. So that breathed new light and got rid of some of these ridiculous traditions. She refused to say obey with her vows, which was made a big deal of, which shouldn't have been a big deal at all. But it was a real sense of modernity to this wedding.
The royal family is represented in a big way on our list of 20 most memorable moments of the decade. One of the most significant and cutest royal events was the birth of Prince George. I sat down with People senior news editor Erin Hill to discuss the birth of the third in line to the throne of England. Let's talk about the birth of Prince George.
Yes.
Such a cutie. He's now 6.
Yeah.
But take me back to that moment. Why was this so significant?
Oh, this was such an amazing moment to see William and Kate's firstborn, the future king of England, which is really exciting. And I think this really brought things full circle for people who have such a soft place in their heart for William, for having gone through the loss of his mother at a young age, but to see him find happiness and love with Kate and for them to start their own family. It was really great to see.
I mean, it's got to be difficult as a royal, I imagine, for William and Kate, because you have your son, he's in the public, they can't go anywhere without being photographed. Are there things that they do to try to make him have a more normal life?
Definitely, and that's where Kate's family really comes in. George's grandparents, Carol and Mike Middleton, Kate's parents, he can kind of have a normal life when he goes to visit them where they're from, in Bucklebury, which is a few hours outside of London. And there is when he can kind of like really let loose, play outside. They take him to like local festivals and carnivals, to the beach, definitely playing outside a little more open. There isn't any press paparazzi there. So that's where he can truly be a little boy.
All right, stay tuned for more from People's list of the 20 most memorable moments of the decade. Welcome back. We are breaking down the 20 most memorable moments of the past decade with the writers and editors of People magazine.
Yeah, so while there were many movies that captivated us in the 2010s, 2013's Frozen became such a phenomenon that we had trouble letting it go from our hearts.
I see what you did there.
Yes. People magazine editorial director Kate Coyne and I talked about the film and its ongoing impact. Let's talk about Frozen.
This was kind of both a throwback to like old school animated fairy tales, mixed with a very, very modern take on storytelling in that it's female-led, no hero needs to save the two sisters. I think everybody could kind of feel really great about the message of the movie. And then, of course, there's the song. So even if you weren't charmed by the story and the characters, this song, Let It Go, is like the earworm to end all earworms. It gets into your head. Kids found it very easy to learn all the words and just know them by heart and belt that song out left and right. And so the song kept it alive in a way that, you really haven't seen with any other animated film.
And then from there, things just got even better and better for Frozen. You got Frozen 2 that was just released. You had Frozen on Broadway. There's Frozen-themed birthday parties. It was just something for young kids to really kind of get excited about.
Yeah, and Frozen 2 has just broken all these box office records. It's made over $1 billion in its opening minutes, practically. It really doesn't show any signs of slowing down.
Yeah, and the names Anna and Elsa very popular. Your kids even kind of.
Yes, this in utero being right here, my little girl at home had suggested that perhaps Anna would be a good name for this baby. That's not happening, so I feel free to say that no, this baby is not going to be named Anna.
Anna is a great name.
It is a great name, it's just not happening in my house.
To pick one female pop star that truly encapsulates this decade would be a nearly impossible task. Then there's all the comments that we would, of course, hear from their legions of fans. We don't want to step into all that. There were so many amazing performers in the past 10 years. We're simply calling this the decade of the diva. Janine Rubenstein and I took some time to discuss our favorite diva moments from a decade overflowing with them. Let's talk about some of the ladies who have led pop music this past decade.
Oh my God.
Who we're going to start with, of course, Beyonce, right?
Beyonce.
The way that she broke the internet and took everything by storm over and over. What sticks out to you?
I mean, she's a juggernaut, but someone who can kind of reshape and redefine the music industry by dropping an album with no promo, no heads up.
Overnight.
Overnight. No one knew it was coming. She drops it in the middle of the night, and then she drops Lemonade, and it is something that, again, hits at nighttime. I remember I was up, watching it, eyes just wide open because it was so beautiful. She just really took this feminist, strong stance and had all of these women. I mean, Serena Williams, you name it, was in this video, this movie, essentially. And the music was on point, and it was so personal. And it was kind of like a woman taking over this narrative of, being scorned or, being cheated on. She called a spade, said what she was going through, and did it in such a beautiful, artistic way that everyone was just shocked.
I'm pretty sure when I heard my mom say, "Who's Becky with the good hair?" I was like, oh, this really did permeate. This went everywhere. Everybody knows. Everybody knows about this. Bachelor 2018.
Oh my goodness, Bachelor. I was there.
Were you?
Oh my God.
Wait, what's the takeaway? You're still glowing from it.
I'm still glowing from it because it was so epic.
Now let's move on and talk about one of the other powerful women of the decade, Lady Gaga.
People have talked about how she kind of redefined this kind of diva area just with how she uses the world as a runway. She steps out of her hotel to go to, Walgreens, and she is in a ball gown or covered in poultry or whatever she does. And it's shocking, but then she backs it up. The year she won the meat dress, she won 8 awards.
Right.
It just speaks to how she owns her space in such a unique and over-the-top way that no one can really duplicate. And then you fast forward to Taylor Swift. She is a boss, and she is speaking like one. She is trying to own her music. She does not care what you think about it. She's going to tell you.
Right.
And she's faced down so many controversies, from Kim Kardashian drama to all of that, to now having the best-selling album of 2019, Lover. It did that in 2 days straight. This woman is an icon at 29.
Yeah, it's hard to compete with that, but you've got Adele, Kesha, Carrie Underwood. I mean, all these powerful women. In some ways, why do you think it was the decade of women when it came to the music world? There was just this interesting emergence of all these powerhouses, right?
We've always had female pop stars, but there was just a gravity and a realness these past 10 years that I think really resonated.
Stay right there. People's 20 most memorable moments of the decade. We'll be right back.
All right, we're back with our look at the 20 most memorable moments of the past decade that defined our lives and entertainment.
For fans of true crime, the past 10 years offered dozens of deathly opportunities to indulge our curiosity in the gruesome details. People deputy editor Wendy Noggle and I delved into the killer true crime exposés of the teens. This was the decade that true crime became so popular. People are obsessed with true crime. Why do you think that is?
It really started in 2014 with the launch of Serial. This was the podcast that took the nation by storm. We just couldn't get enough. People were downloading these episodes, binging through them, and it was a reminder that this kind of old form of storytelling was still as vital and new as ever.
Yeah, the interesting thing about Serial was that the case was not that old. And so people were listening, they were trying to figure it out and actually solve it while you're listening to Sarah Koenig talk about this in such a soothing way. She had that great voice and everything. Yeah, do you think it gets a little dangerous when people are so obsessed with stories about murder and true crime?
I think it can be, because if we're not careful, we could sway public opinion, which obviously can affect the justice process in these cases. But many of these cases have resulted in finding victims, bringing people to trial. Some of those cases are still winding their way through the courts, but hopefully some of these might result in solving some cold cases.
And you see that with Making a Murderer.
I think in some ways these were a reaction to short takes or even Twitter stories that we were following. These were real in-depth journalistic stories and long-form storytelling where you could go as deep as you wanted into these cases.
Man, and when you don't get things answered, that's what keeps you going back for more, and that's why there's always the sequels and the next one. It is very addicting.
If you need one easy way to see how much the way we consume entertainment has changed in the last 10 years, look no further than your smart TV's menu. You've got Netflix and other streaming services that broke the world of entertainment wide open this decade. People Entertainment Project's editor Mary Green and I discussed the ways watching TV will never be the same. Netflix changed the game in how people consume their media, their TV shows, and everything else. Talk some about that and how that really has been such a significant thing in the last 10 years or so and how people watch shows.
Before, even if you had a DVR, you basically were set, your schedule was set around the networks when they broadcast things. With Netflix, now people got to watch whatever they wanted, whenever they wanted.
Really, it's changed for a generation in terms of just how they consume media, creating an appetite for the here and now in a new way, hasn't it?
Exactly, versus having to wait an entire week for one episode. People just aren't used to it. You have to credit Netflix for being so forward thinking, because Apple, Google, Amazon, these are places that also could have been ahead of the curve, but Netflix was the first one to really dive in and take a big swing.
You think about the money that they put out and the big major deals they do with people like Ryan Murphy, people like Shonda Rhimes, some of those major players that have come on to create content and more long-term deals. That's a revolutionary thing over the past decade as well, huh?
Yeah, I mean, look, the Obamas are going to have their first movie out sometime next year, and they signed a big multi-year, multi-project deal. So Netflix is literally attracting everyone. In a way, with Netflix, everyone realized that if we're going to enter this, if we're going to encourage people to pay $4.99 or $6.99 a month, we have to immediately offer them 5, 6 things that they want to watch to make it good.
People Magazine's 20 most memorable moments of the decade will be right back. All right, if you're just joining us, you're watching People Magazine's 20 most memorable moments of the decade.
The next moment on our list is actually a movement that was years in the making. In 2017, hashtag Me2 made issues of sexual harassment and assault a national conversation that continues today. People Entertainment Project's editor Mary Green and I explored the ongoing impact and its monumental change to Hollywood, the media, and beyond. One of the most defining moments, perhaps in Hollywood history, the Me2 movement. I mean, we're talking about it in the context of the decade, but it's really hard to sum up what an impact this has had in the history of cinema, how things are done, and the awareness there is now in filmmaking and in Hollywood in general, in the world of entertainment, and how business is conducted, right?
Absolutely. It has been a complete game changer. I think in the way that everything is produced in Hollywood, and in the way that people with a voice are speaking up and adding writers, et cetera, to make sure that this isn't just a flash in the pan, that this actually is permanent change.
We talk about looking back at how this all began in 2017, the New York Times article where Ashley Judd spoke out. You had Ronan Farrow and his now infamous, really, New Yorker article and write-up with so many stories of women coming forward with allegations against Harvey Weinstein.
It wasn't just a couple of articles that talked about bad behavior of people within the entertainment industry. This is something that, because of Me2, literally because of Me2, other women across the world started speaking up and saying, hey, I have a story like this too. This happened to me. This happened to me. And because millions of women came forward and said, and raised their hand and told hard, difficult truths, I think that made the story global. Hopefully, it's going to become an even more diverse industry, and in general, hopefully businesses will become more and more diverse.
Even with the advent of streaming, late-night shows still offer Americans a chance to check in with the culture at large on a nightly basis. This decade saw some major shifts in hosts, as well as the way that we view content. I chatted with senior writer Emily Strom about late night's biggest changes. All right, so this is an event that happens kind of every 20 years or so in television, the changing of the guard. Last time had a lot of drama. You had Jay Leno kind of changing it over to Conan, and first he gave it to Conan, he left, but then NBC kind of messed up, they brought him back, there was a lot of drama, and then Conan actually left. This was all over the media. It was a huge deal. But then when Jay Leno turned it over to Fallon, it was a little easier, right? A little more smooth.
Yeah, it was a completely different situation. You know, we saw so much drama a decade ago with the changing of the guard, and luckily this time around went much, much smoother.
What's really interesting is the way that we consume late night TV, especially late night talk shows, is very different than it was a while ago.
No one's staying up till, 11, 12 to catch these late night shows, because why would you when you can, Google it the next morning? It's so easy, and I think that's how most of us are consuming this media now. It's which clip was the most exciting, what was the funniest, and you can get basically the entire show in a 20-second clip.
Of course, there is some criticism of the men on late night. You have Fallon, Kimmel, Colbert, 3 white guys. There's not a ton of diversity. A little more this decade with Hassan Minhaj. You have Samantha Bee. You have Trevor Noah, Lily Singh, even though her time slot is 1:35 in the morning.
We need more diversity, but again, it is positive that we're seeing a little bit more movement, but definitely a lot of room to grow.
We've got a lot more memorable moments of the decade coming up right after the break. Stay with us.
Welcome back. We are discussing the 20 most memorable moments of the decade, and it was not an easy task to narrow down 10 years worth of events, but the next pick, obviously no-brainer.
Yes, of course. So it's not every day a 2-time sexiest man alive and perennial bachelor gets married. Yes, Silver Fox and heartthrob George Clooney officially went off the market September 27, 2014. I talked to People magazine editorial director Kate Coyne all about the nuptials and the impact of this power couple. This was the decade that George Clooney, Hollywood hunk, infamous bachelor, went off the market. Can you believe it?
I work on the Sexiest Man Alive issue of People, and he, of course, is a 2-time reigning sexiest man alive, and in those interviews he made it very clear that marriage was not for him, that kids were not part of his future, that he knew that was a big goal for a lot of people out there, and he could tell it just wasn't for him. And so certainly if you had told me at the start of the decade, if you had said in 2010, George Clooney will end this decade a married father of 2, I would have said absolutely not. There's just no way. But I guess when lightning strikes, it happened. They met, and then before you knew it, they were engaged, and then before you knew it, they were married.
Yeah, and then they have twins, Ella and Alexander, in 2017. And fatherhood really changed George, right?
I think it really has. I think it has, shockingly, for a man who didn't think he needed this in his life, it's really completed him and given him a sense of wholeness and a sense of purpose that he never would have had before. I think it's one of the biggest transformations of the decade, really.
Yeah, and George Clooney, this famous actor, and Amal is a human rights lawyer. Why do these two make such a great power couple?
This is in no way a slight to the women who George had dated before, but in his past relationship, they were very often with actresses, models. There was famously a former cocktail waitress / aspiring actress in the mix. And to shift from that to a celebrated human rights attorney noted for her work on rather intense political and civil rights issues, you know, I mean, he more than met his match. And so I think that that's really one of the reasons that they're so ideally suited for each other.
No discussion of this era would be complete without mention of the historic 2016 presidential election. People's editor-in-chief Dan Wakeford shed some light onto why this event made our list of memorable moments of the decade. It's interesting, especially from the perspective of us here at People covering the celebrity culture at length. Donald Trump obviously existed in that culture first. Talk about how that ended up impacting and playing into his political success as well. He sort of had this groundswell of a fan base going into it, which was very unique to a politician.
Donald Trump had spent years cultivating an image of being a powerful, successful man before he was even on The Apprentice, and then he was on television. This amplified his fame. And then from there, to have somebody who was so recognized and so powerful of an image already to go into a presidency really gave him a head start.
Sure. I guess one of the key parts of the Trump phenomenon has been his use of Twitter. Social media in general in politics, but particularly the president's use of Twitter, is unlike anything we've ever seen. And that in and of itself has revolutionized the way politicians are communicating with their base, with the public, hasn't it?
That has been a trend in the last decade with all celebrities, having a unique voice. I've got my own platform. I don't necessarily, like Trump feels, he doesn't need the press to communicate his platform in an authoritative way.
Yeah. One of the most fascinating parts of the campaign leading up to the presidential election was the now infamous Access Hollywood tape. It was something that probably in a more traditional campaign would have been the thing that would have derailed a candidate.
The actual incident itself was a moment when you look back and you're like, there's nothing that could change anybody who supported Trump. If this moment didn't derail his presidential campaign, then nothing really could have done. I think within the history of America, Trump's presidency is going to be one of the most talked about presidencies of hundreds and hundreds of years.
In the 2010s, blockbusters got supersized, and you can't get more super than superheroes. People Entertainment Project's editor Mary Green and I discussed their domination at the box office and why we won't get franchise fatigue anytime soon. I mean, for any fanboy, fangirl, fan anything about the comic book world, this has been the decade.
I think it's changed pop culture completely. And I think that what the studios have done brilliantly is translate them to a broad audience. Now, in fact, they're very representational of the entire movie-going audience as a whole.
You look at what Marvel did as they came through with the Avengers and all these different characters, Iron Man, you look at the advent of those movies and the tone they were able to hit that changed the game in a new way and maybe made it more big, tentpole, popcorn superhero movie.
Absolutely. And in a way, it really begins with Marvel's choice to cast Robert Downey Jr., someone who is now one of our most beloved actors. And with him really in the center of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, they were able, it's like immediately he was the tone setter for all of their films.
The DC universe has taken a little bit of a different path.
It's interesting because forever in the DC universe, I mean, there have been a number of Superman films, you know, going all the way back actually to the television show. And then, of course, you had Christopher Reeve, etc. And you also had a number of Batman. DC launched with them, but then Wonder Woman and, of course, Aquaman last year actually outshined both of their traditional superheroes. And I think what it shows is that the audience is becoming more and more diversified.
Where do we go next with this? Will it end, or is it just kind of like goes forever?
It's hard to imagine it ending because right now you have the world's greatest filmmakers all participating. And also a lot of the world's greatest actors.
All right, there are even more moments to come. We'll be right back to continue breaking down the final 10 most memorable moments of the decade.
All right, thanks again for joining us. We've had a blast so far discussing some of the most memorable moments of the decade, including royal weddings, dashing divas, and superheroes.
In terms of delivering the laughs this decade, no actress was more consistent than Melissa McCarthy. People magazine editorial director Kate Coyne and I tried to keep a straight face talking about our favorite Melissa memories over the years. I really think this was the decade for Melissa McCarthy. Why was she such a hit these past 10 years?
It was really Bridesmaids and her performance in that, which just is probably at least one of the most memorable comedic performances in film of the last decade, if not several decades.
I mean, a lot of funny women in that cast, but she stole the show.
She stole it. She completely stole it. She got an Emmy nomination for Saturday Night Live hosting. I think that really she is someone who has shown she's not just a flash in the pan funny lady. She's a real powerhouse.
She really is, but still as a funny lady, we have to talk about her impersonation of Sean Spicer. So she hosted SNL 5 times. She won the Emmy in 2017. But people loved that Sean Spicer impersonation, right?
Because again, it's one of those Melissa McCarthy performances where you watch it and you think, no one else could do this.
In 2018, she was the 3rd highest paid actress in Hollywood, still making less than her male counterparts, but she also would speak about that as well.
She's very open about a lot of topics that she rightly deemed unfair and unjust. And in a lot of ways, she was ahead of the game in terms of the body positivity movement and the idea of you need to ask me about more than my dress size.
She's done so many amazing things. I feel like she's gonna keep going this next decade and we're still gonna be talking about her. They say home is where the heart is, right?
True. Yeah.
And Home and Garden TV certainly got a lot of love this past decade. HGTV and its stable of endlessly watchable personalities, not to mention the decade worth of design tips, had to make our list. I sat down with People senior writer Emily Strom to talk about how this network's many hits really hit close to home.
People are just obsessed. Chip and Joanna, I've had the opportunity to meet many times. I've been to Waco, and people always ask me, are they really that nice? Are they really that sweet? And I'm like, yes. So I get it. You know, I completely understand the draw to them, and I think they're just really down to earth and relatable, and people love that about them. They had no idea when they shot the pilot aired in 2013. I mean, people fly from all over the world to Waco, Texas, just to get a little piece of Magnolia.
They're starting a hotel. They have books. They're also starting a network as well.
Yeah, what don't they have? I don't even know any other talent or, you know, reality star that basically went from, you know, just having their own show to owning their own network. I mean, it's huge.
All right, let's talk Property Brothers.
Yes.
These two guys are so lovable. You've met them both.
I think people just trust them. You know, they've shown us time and time again that their work is really appealing to so many different, you know, people. And it's like, if you get, you know, the stamp of approval from Jonathan and Drew Scott, you know, your house is going to sell. The design is going to be good, you know? So I think people just love that about them. They're just really great at what they do.
This decade, we're seeing these hosts, like the Property Brothers, like Chip and Joanna Gaines, become these huge celebrities. We haven't really seen that in the past before, so why is that so significant?
They want more content and they want to see them in all different types of ways. Of course, Jonathan and Drew Scott especially are very interactive when it comes to their fans. You know, they're constantly asking their opinion, involving them. And you know, they've got a new magazine coming out, and one of the things that they said is that they want their magazine to be more personal than any other magazine out there. So they want to engage readers and really just have conversations.
The internet didn't come of age this decade, but social media and its complete overhaul of our lives certainly did. Driving this cultural force were influencers. People senior editor Janine Rubenstein and I shared our thoughts about them. Watch. An industry that didn't even exist, really, 10 years ago. The influencer. Sponsored people on the internet. They've got social media followings. They get paid to create content.
There's so much money there. It's crazy. You have people getting late night shows off of, you know, having a really good Instagram or really good Insta stories.
All of a sudden, any random person at their home in the middle of nowhere can get a following on social media and become a huge star. But also, the kind of advent over the past decade of the backlash of social media and the backlash that influencers can have when they do something that's too extreme or they go over the line. You think about Logan Paul and everything that went on in that suicide force.
It's called cancel culture.
Yeah.
And that's something that came about this decade.
Yeah.
Just people saying they'll love you and they will follow you and they will like and heart and everything. But do something wrong, it is a swift judgment that happens on Twitter and on Instagram.
Yeah.
Like, you will see it in the comments, and companies, huge corporations are taking note. Like, if you have a shifting in terms of your public opinion, that is something that could, you could lose your job. SNL has let go of some talent over what has been said on social media. It's twofold. Like, the fans want more. They want to know more. They want you to say more. They want you to joke. They want to see your personality. But be careful about what you do say, and that you don't cross this line, and that you're with the times.
We're almost to the end of our list. Stay right here for more of People's most memorable moments of the decade.
Welcome back. As we continue to look back on the decade's most memorable moments, it's amazing to think about how much has changed.
Yeah, coming in next on our list of memorable moments of the past 10 years, a positive development, a record-breaking amount of women elected to Congress, with 126 in this current term. People Deputy Editor Wendy Noggle and I discussed how this historic change has influenced both politics and culture. This decade was so monumental for women in politics, especially women in Congress. Why was it such a significant year and also decade?
Well, back in the 90s in 1992, they called that the Year of the Woman. Well, that has been wiped out by what happened in this decade. What we saw after the 2016 election is that people were angry about the results. You saw so many people taking to the streets, marching on Washington, marching in their local cities, and they wanted change.
A lot of women that are serving now kind of grew up at that time. The events that were going on in the world inspired them to then take that path, right?
I think so, and I think what we will see is hopefully these returns will continue. The other thing that we're seeing is how politicians are able to use Twitter and Facebook and their social media platforms to talk directly to their constituents. People like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was incredibly effective at doing that.
She named the squad.
Exactly.
You got AOC, you got Rashida Tlaib, you got Ilhan Omar and Ayanna Pressley, and she actually put that on Instagram when they were called out by Donald Trump. Obviously, he tweeted some very negative things about them, and she called them the squad on Instagram, and that really excites a younger generation. To break down the stats, 126 women in Congress right now out of 535, that's about 23%. Still a long ways to go, but it's up from 5 years ago where it was 19%. Do you think that this trend is going to keep going up?
I think so. I mean, as I said, if you see it, you can be it. Women still face a lot of sexism on the campaign trail. They struggle to raise as much fundraising dollars as men. There's lots of research on that. Hopefully, it will just be who the best person for the job is rather than what their gender is.
No book brought the heat this decade quite like the red-hot 50 Shades of Grey series, which of course was brought to the big screen as well. People senior editor Janine Rubenstein explained the phenomena and how it brought sex to the mainstream on page and screen. 50 Shades of Grey. What are you calling it?
The sex.
We're talking about the sex here in this little segment. When we talk about, look, over the past decade, few things have had the cultural impact that 50 Shades of Grey has had, for better or worse, whether you like the book, whether you like the movie or the movies. But sum it up, just from your initial thought, when you hear 50 Shades of Grey, what comes to mind? What can you say?
I'm not going to say the sex again. But no, that's what it was. It was all about sex and kind of freeing your inhibitions and doing and saying things that are considered taboo.
I kind of feel like the buzz around it and like the talk about what it was almost more salacious than what was actually in it. In some ways,
true.
right? Like it alluded to a lot of things, but then what people said it was about was almost like, wait, you're projecting some of your own stuff into what you think this is. But why do you think the book caught on in the way that it did?
That is so true. I mean, word of mouth.
Right.
That's really what it was. And girlfriends texting and saying like, oh my goodness, there's this book that is, not completely like unreadable, but very, very sexy for what we would actually normally read. So it like fit this like weird window of like, it's really sexy, but it's not dirty.
Right. It's acceptable. Like it's fine. There was so much buzz surrounding the casting of the movie. Who would be casting those main characters? It ended up being Jamie Dornan, Dakota Johnson. But there was so much buzz about who it possibly could have been leading up to that.
Yeah, it was supposed to be Charlie Hunnam,
Right.
and then he turned it down for whatever reason, and then all eyes are on like, who is it? Is he sexy enough?
Right.
Is he going to be dark enough? Am I going to believe it?
Right.
And these guys, when they came in, there was some backlash because people were just so invested. Like, you can't win them all, but it still, like, broke the box office.
Fans of the royal family didn't have a lack of memorable moments this decade, but the wedding of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle broke with tradition in a way that made the world take notice and take interest. Senior news editor Erin Hill explained why this moment captivated us all on both sides of the pond. Take me back. So, when did Prince Harry meet Meghan Markle, and was this always kind of destined as soon as they met?
They met on a blind date. Mutual friends set them up in the summer of 2016, and it was very much a whirlwind romance. From that first date, they immediately set up a second date. Weeks later, they're camping under the stars in Botswana, and then it was just like full on from there.
Yeah, I know that in 2016, Kensington Palace issued a statement basically confirming that they were together, and that was because of criticism from the press, from social media, which Meghan has had to face this entire time. I think it's so unfair.
And this was such a groundbreaking moment for the royal family. Nobody has really ever issued something quite so personal and emotional as Harry's statement in October 2016, which not only confirmed that they were dating, but was really kind of targeted against the media scrutiny that she had been facing, online trolls, sexist abuse, racist abuse. He was horrified, and he was from the get-go protecting her as much as he could.
So then they announced their engagement. Everyone's going wild. They get married in May of 2018 and definitely bucked some royal traditions here. What were the more surprising things that you thought happened at the wedding?
Has to be the American touches we saw. Having an American bishop there who gave this really stirring sermon that was really incredible. Of course, having a gospel choir there, and then having them sing "Stand By Me," an American classic. So there's all these little elements, and then seeing Meghan walk down partially by herself until she was then greeted by her future father-in-law, Prince Charles. I mean, there's a lot of real, unexpected, non-traditional moments.
All right, when we come back, the conclusion of People's list of most memorable moments of the decade. All right, we have almost reached the end of our list of the most memorable moments of the decade.
Our next moment is certainly the musical of the decade and has to be in the running for Best Musical of the Century. Explaining how Hamilton shot to the top with a bullet in 2015, here's my conversation with People writer Dave Quinn. Let's talk about Hamilton. Why was this so new and invigorating for people?
Well, I think for the most part, you have Lin-Manuel Miranda to thank for that. He is a visionary when it comes to musicals. In the Heights, which was his musical before Hamilton, and what was so great about that, it was the first time we really saw an authentic hip-hop musical.
Yeah, it was interesting because in 2009, he performed at the White House, and he did a song, Alexander Hamilton, and also told the audience that he wanted to do a hip-hop album about the founding fathers, namely Alexander Hamilton, and people kind of laughed it off, and then he made it a reality.
He kind of related to that story. So he was able to infuse a lot of his own experiences into Alexander Hamilton and show that a founding father was not, this like old white guy that we kind of on money that we had normally thought of. You saw a fully diverse cast playing the founding fathers, really making a statement that, we are all part of America, no matter what race, gender, ethnicity we are.
Yeah, and then I was going to say it obviously did really well. Nominated for 16 Tony Awards, and that's never happened before. Won 11, including Best Musical.
And it won Lin-Manuel Miranda a Pulitzer Prize. Lin-Manuel Miranda was able to make history cool for so many people, but also he and his show came along at a time when musicals were starting to become cool again. You started to see these, in this past decade, these amazing NBC and Fox live musical presentations. You had shows like Glee that were really embracing the theater kids, and the theater dorks. Smash was doing the same thing. And then this resurgence of the American musical movie, where we started to see these original musicals kind of hit the big screen again in ways that we hadn't seen before. It all really came to a head with Hamilton. He made it happen. And boy, am I happy for it.
The U.S. women's national soccer team rallied the country behind them not once, but twice this decade, securing the World Cup title in both 2015 and 2019. I spoke with People Deputy Editor Wendy Noggle to recap the winning years these unstoppable women have had. The U.S. women's soccer team has had a huge year and a huge decade. They've won 4 World Cups total to this decade, and then they won July of this year against the Netherlands 2-0. This was a huge moment.
When you look back over this decade, there is probably no other team that has dominated like they have. There's only been 10 months out of the entire decade that they weren't ranked #1. But in addition to that, really people were rallying behind the cause that what they stand for. They were standing for equal pay, equal playing conditions. These are conversations that are happening in the public in every woman's office place and every negotiation when someone's going for a new job. So that was really everything that they stood for in this amazing year that they had.
Yeah, and they were really these great role models off and on the field, especially when they used their platform for good. Like you said, talking about equal pay. Then you had Megan Rapinoe, who made a lot of headlines when she said she won't go to the White House. So she kind of did bring politics into it, and it makes you really feel good, especially at a time where there's a lot of tense things going on in the world.
Exactly, and it was a moment that really transcended sports, as you said. You know, one of the things that this team talked about time and time again is just how much they worked for this. They worked together, they worked as a team, and I think every kid out there knows these players' names, boys and girls. They see them, they see how strong they are. It's just an example to the entire next generation.
What other hurdles do you think the team has to overcome to finally get there?
I think that's really key. Also the playing conditions, playing on grass, not AstroTurf, which can cause more injuries for them. And you know, this is going to transcend probably even as some of the players start to leave this team, but we'll have eyes on them all over again next year at the Olympic Games, and they are obviously the favorites for gold.
Kourtney, Kim, Khloe, Kendall, Kylie, Kris, Caitlyn. Chances are you haven't gone a single week this decade without reading one of these names in the headlines. The Kardashian-Jenner clan has transformed their reality TV success into running one of the largest empires in Hollywood. I sat down with People writer Dave Quinn to discuss the biggest moments from this crazy crew with a K. Keeping Up with the Kardashians started in 2007, still going strong. Why are we so obsessed with this family?
Well, I think what's so amazing about the Kardashians is that they are such an intricate family who goes through so many different obstacles, but really love one another throughout it all. They have stood by one another's side through all of their ups and downs, marriages, divorces, kids. You name it, they've kind of gone through it. What is the saying goes, the devil works hard, but Kris Jenner works harder.
Yes.
She is very much steering the wheels in all of these different amazing careers for these ladies.
How do we go from A to B here?
Well, it's interesting because you would think that somebody having a sex tape come out would be the end of their career, but Kim was really able to pivot on that. And she was able to turn tragedy for many people, and embarrassment, public humiliation, into something kind of aspirational in a way, right? And I think the major shift that happened for her was the Paris robbery that happened a few years back. She went through this terribly tragic thing where she was held up at gunpoint and had her jewels stolen. And many people would have joked that, oh, that's what you kind of get, and oh, you know, you're somebody who flaunts your wealth, but she really took that seriously, talked about how serious it was for her family, and turned around her life.
She dates and marries Kanye West, and that brings in a whole new crop of fans. And so their relationship really also kind of catapulted her to another level. And then in this family, I thought it was interesting that Kylie Jenner really rose to the top, being named the self-made billionaire. A lot of people had issues with this. How did Kylie end up doing this? It was like a sneak attack.
Yeah, well, let's not forget that when we met Kylie in the beginning of this decade, she was 12, okay? And now she's 22 and a billionaire. So talk about what a difference 10 years can make.
Then you have Caitlyn Jenner, who came out as a trans woman this decade. It was all over the press and mainstream media. Why was this so significant?
Well, I talk about this a lot because as somebody who grew up gay, watching the public change their perspective once you started to see representation on television really was a game changer in my own life. So when Will and Grace came on TV and everybody started being more accepting of gay people, that really shifted things for me in my everyday life. Caitlyn Jenner did that for an entire generation of trans people. She gave a face to the transgender movement. It's almost like the Kardashians are an episode of Degrassi. Like you can find something in there that everybody can relate to, an issue that you're going through, they've gone through.
All right, that is our show. Thank you so much for joining us to sum up the most memorable moments of the decade.
Yes, who knows what the 20s will bring, but if they're half as eventful as the last 10 years, we're in for a wild ride.
From People TV, I'm Jeremy Parsons.
And I'm Andrea Belke. Here's to the next decade.
Woo!